طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. All praise belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and peace and blessings of Allah ta'ala be upon all the prophets of Allah and the last and final messenger of Allah, the Imam of the messengers, the best of the messengers, our beloved, Allah's beloved Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sallam. I'd like to welcome everyone with the greeting of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Inshallah, this is our live Q&A focusing on Ramadan in terms of what we can attain from Ramadan, in terms of benefits, what we can attain from Ramadan, in terms of blessings, what we can do in Ramadan in terms of us changing ourselves and bettering ourselves. Keep in mind the famous hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which he sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "إذا جاء رمضان فتحت أبواب الجنة وغلقت أبواب النار وسفدت الشياطين أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم." He said, when the Ramadan enters, the gates of Jannah are not opened but flung open. There's a difference between futihat and futtihat with the tashdid. The gates of Jannah are flung open and the gates of hellfire are shut, and the devils or the shayateen are shackled. So very, very important. It's a great opportunity for us changing ourselves for the better, and us improving our relationship with Allah Almighty, and us becoming better Muslims. With that, inshallah, we've organized a live Q&A for our community members. Inshallah, before we take any questions or ask any questions to our panelists, just to inshallah let the brothers and sisters know, we have with us Sheikh Sabir or Sheikh Syed, Maqsud Elahi, a Hafid of Quran in many qira'at, and also a Khatib and Imam at Lusham Islamic Center. We also have with us Sheikh Mustafa Omer, a graduate from the Islamic University of Medina, and has also studied the Shafi fiqh and Shafi usul, and has ijaza in that specific school, and also is an Imam and a Khatib at Al-Furqan Education and Masjid in Hounslow. Inshallah, Imam Ashraf Dabous, also graduate from the Islamic University of Medina, a specialist in Hanafi fiqh and Hanbali fiqh, and also one of the Khatibs and Imams at Lusham Islamic Center. He will join us shortly, inshallah. But before we open up to any questions, inshallah, I would request Sheikh Syed Maqsud Elahi to inshallah start with some recitation of the Quran, please.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون أياما معدودات. فمن كان منكم مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر. وعلى الذين يطيقونه فدية طعام مسكين. فمن تطوع خيرا فهو خير له. وأن تصوموا خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان. فمن شهد منكم الشهر فليصمه. ومن كان مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر. يريد الله بكم اليسر ولا يريد بكم العسر ولتكملوا العدة ولتكبروا الله على ما هداكم ولعلكم تشكرون. وإذا سألك عبادي عني فإني قريب أجيب دعوة الداع إذا دعان فليستجيبوا لي وليؤمنوا بي لعلهم يرشدون. أحل لكم ليلة الصيام الرفث إلى نسائكم هن لباس لكم وأنتم لباس لهن. علم الله أنكم كنتم تختانون أنفسكم فتاب عليكم وعفى عنكم، فالآن باشروهن وابتغوا ما كتب الله لكم وكلوا واشربوا حتى يتبين لكم الخيط الأبيض من الخيط الأسود من الفجر، ثم أتموا الصيام إلى الليل ولا تباشروهن وأنتم عاكفون في المساجد، تلك حدود الله فلا تقربوها، كذلك يبين الله آياته للناس لعلهم يتقون. صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Syed Maqsud Elahi, for the recitation, focusing on the ayats of Siyam, the ayats of fasting, and the ayats of Quran. Inshallah, I want to start, inshallah, with some questions, inshallah, for our panelists. Imam Ashraf, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Jazakallah khair for joining us, inshallah. We gave a brief introduction to all of our participants, their studies, and inshallah also what they're up to currently, inshallah. But Sheikh Sayyid Maqsud Elahi, a question for you, inshallah. It is said the month of Ramadan, Shahrul Quran. The month of Ramadan is the month of Quran. What can a Muslim do concerning the Quran in this blessed month?
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. جزاكم الله خيرا Shakeel. It's a very important question, and I think this question we should ask every one of us ourselves. But first, what I can do regarding my situation with the Quran. If we notice the ayah recited, it says شهر رمضان الذي, there's no siyam there, there's no salat. Allah mentioned that this Ramadan is so important because the first thing Allah talked about, the Quran. This was, as you rightly said, Shahrul Quran. Now, it's first, everyone's context is different. Everyone's understanding or the situation in terms of relationship with the Quran is different. In one word, if I want to say, I would say, build your relationship much stronger with the Quran in this month. Now, if I'm a scholar and I have alhamdulillah knowledge of the Quran, then the first thing, there is no end limit that you can't reach the maximum. This is the optimum level. You can't reach after that. There is no such station like this. If you look at the past, all the scholars, the Khairul Qurun, all the from the Sahaba, Tabi'in, Atba'ut Tabi'in, all the scholars. Soon you see, look at their siyar, their biography, or when you look at their lifestyle, once the Ramadan approached, what they used to do, they put everything aside. If there is the scholars of hadith book aside, if the scholars of fiqh books of hadith, everything they put aside and just focus on the Quran. That shows that even if you are the great scholar, you have still room to build your relationship with the Quran. You have to stronger your relationship with the Quran. And likewise, for the lay people, those who of us may not be able to minimum they read Quran correctly. I would say the first goal should be set that as I have to read the Quran correctly in this month. And if I have the next step, I know how to read Quran, alhamdulillah, then I have to make sure that my recitation has to be correct. Now, if I, alhamdulillah, have my recitation is correct, then there's the increase of recitation, the how much I can increase in this much. And it's just before going to more deeper, I would just one thing, there should be a checklist and review point. What I say, maybe every 5 days. Okay, I'm not going to set the target for whole month. If I set the target whole month, break it down to every 5 days so I can review how am I doing. And alhamdulillah, in the current the situation we are in a way, it's a good for us, but it would stop us from lots of outside distraction. That is stepping out, physical movement was restricted in home. So that would give us more room to focus on the Quran. And then, as I said, if I have my recitation correct, my increase of recitation, then the same with understanding of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, sometimes we are too much focused in understanding. We're reading the tafsir, we're reading in the books of maybe the scholars explaining the surah or something. But we make sure we have to focus on qira'ah mainly. The scholars sometimes it's good that 1:3. If I put maybe 1 hour in understanding, 3 hours in reading Quran. Okay, it should be go hand in hand the understanding at the same time recitation. But recitation should be getting the more portion of your time. And this is the, inshallah, we will talk about the further. So I would say that in the word, build a stronger relationship with the Quran.
MashaAllah, Jazakumullah khair, Sheikh Sabir. So a very, very important kind of like point in terms of us attaching ourselves to Al-Quran Al-Kareem. As you mentioned, Shahru Ramadan alladhi unzila fihi Al-Quran, which leads me to something which you kind of like concluded at the end in terms of understanding and tadabbur. So Imam Mustafa, Sheikh Mustafa Omer, in terms of, you know, you have this kind of like dilemma, okay, I want to complete the whole Quran, or I want to recite it twice, 3 times completely. Should the emphasis be in Khatm al-Quran, completion and recitation, or should the emphasis be tadabbur and reflection? Or can there be a balance in between? What would you say concerning that?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Jazakallah khair, Imam Shakeel, for the question. In the times that we're living in nowadays, I feel like many of us have kind of become a little bit disenfranchised. I mean, maybe disenchanted, or we've kind of turned away a lot from the Quran, and we focus much more on memorizing and learning how to recite the Quran with proper tajweed. Whereas maybe many of us lost the actual understanding as to why the revelation was revealed in the first place. So I think that definitely there needs to be an understanding or an attempt to try and understand what the Quran is actually trying to say, and what the information that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed is trying to disseminate amongst the people and mankind. One of the biggest problems that we see nowadays when it comes to Quranic studies, generally speaking, is that people learn the Quran, but they don't know what it means. So they miss out on the opportunity to be able to embody the characteristics that are mentioned in the Quran. So I think a balance between the two is very important. There needs to be a level of where a person is reciting Quran as much as an amount that they're able to do so they don't do something which is beyond their capacity. But at the same time, they try and actually know exactly the meaning of what it is that they're reciting at the same time. So I think a balance between both approaches would be very suitable, inshallah, and give a huge, my advice would be, and probably what I would do for myself really and truly, would be trying to give a huge amount of emphasis on trying to understand the meaning of the Quran and what the Quran actually is telling us, because we need to try and reconnect with Allah, especially in times of tribulation, so we're in right now. Trying to make that reconnection and trying to understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling me, what is Allah subhanahu, what communication does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have with me as a creation, what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling me. I think that's something that we really need to try and give some focus on. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakumullah khair, barakallah feek, Sheikh Mustafa. Important answer, and I think for our viewers, inshallah, that attachment to the book of Allah through tadabbur and then reflection and action as well is very, very crucial. I remember coming across this athar, and I think it's Abdullah bin Maqsud radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who would say, look, we would learn 10 ayats, and then the 10 ayats, practice, understand them, and then put them into practice before we go on to another 10 ayats. And even they say, look, in the time of the Sahaba, the early Sahaba, the Huffaz were very, very few initially. Yeah, but what they knew, they were putting into practice. I think the Ummah is kind of like lacking in putting what we know into action concerning the book of Allah Ta'ala. And also the narration, this is a hadith concerning Abu Abdullah bin Maqsud, when the Messenger of Allah told him, recite to me some Quran, he said, oh Messenger of Allah, how can I recite to you when upon you the Quran came? And he said, I like to hear it from someone else. Then recited and then reached the ayah in Surah An-Nisa, how will it be when we will bring witnesses over their people and we'll bring you as a witness over your people? And the Messenger of Allah said to him, Hasbuk al-ad, stop there. He said, I looked at the face of the person, he was crying. That was the Messenger of Allah having that tadabbur, and that ayah or that verse was heavy on him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But anyway, inshallah, we move on to Sheikh Ashraf Dabous, inshallah. Imam Ashraf, inshallah, a question for you, maybe a bit controversial, but of course, you have these debates concerning Taraweeh prayers. One issue is concerning the 8 and 23, or the number of rak'at units concerning the prayer. How many rak'at should a Muslim pray? And also, can a person also pray Taraweeh prayers inside the home? Should they only be in a masjid, especially now that we have our masajid, which are also part of the lockdown and closed? Any views on that, Ustad Ashraf?
Barakallahu feekum. Firstly, the issue of the raka'at. So the madhahib, they're in agreement. The Hanbali, the Shafi'i, the Maliki, and the Hanafi madhab, they're all in agreement to the number of raka'at, the minimum being 20 raka'at, and they have multiple evidences for that. The main evidence being Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu bringing the Sahaba together after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, behind an Imam, and the people of Medina in fact used to pray more than 20 rak'at, and that's why the Maliki madhab, they do mention praying more than 20 rak'at. But generally speaking, the four madhahib, they're in agreement that the minimum is 20 rak'at plus the witr and the shafa', so 23. And of course, it's something which is sunnah mu'akkada. It's not something which is obligatory, compulsory. The witr prayer is compulsory in the Hanafi madhab, and even in the Hanbali madhab, it's considered to be very, very close to a sin if a person leaves off witr. Imam Ahmad, he said about the person who leaves off witr that he's rajul su, that he's an evil person. And they asked him why. He said, basically what they say is that because it shows that there's something else there, that there's an issue with the person if they're not praying the witr prayer, which is another discussion. But as for praying in the home, it's especially now, it's something which is highly recommended, and it depends on a person's capability and capacity. So for some, they can pray 20 rak'at, for some they can pray 8 rak'at, for some they can pray 5 rak'at. Anything that a person can pray consistently, then that should be the number that they attempt to pray. I would say, do not, to those that are watching, do not overburden yourself, and do not try to do more than you're capable of doing. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that which is done consistently, even if it's small in amount, is more beloved to Allah than that which is not consistent but is large in amount. So a person may get the enthusiasm of the initial beginning of the month, pray 20, some may even pray more, 20 plus tahajjud, plus shafa' and witr, and then after a few days they stop completely. So it's better to allocate, I would say, a time. Don't in these times, I'd say allocate a time. Don't allocate a number. Allocate 45 minutes, say for example half an hour, where you pray as much as you can. And if you want to do more, then alhamdulillah, that's a blessing. And do it consistently, and do it with the household, especially for those that are at home with their wife, their wife and their children, or their husband and their children. Pray together as a family. And this is a very, very important time that we're currently going through for our families, because our families now are going to learn from us. Our children are going to learn from us. And so if they see good from us, they're going to copy that good. We don't need to teach them what sunnah prayer is, what Taraweeh prayer is, what suhoor is, what iftar is, if they see us doing it, and if we engage them in those actions. So now it's very, very important to try to do as much good as possible in this month. And I would also add to that, the fact that our masajid are closed is even more of a reason that we should be praying at home and begging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy upon us, because it's something which it's a great calamity, the masajid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being closed worldwide. Perhaps in some countries they're still open, but the biladul Haramain, Egypt, Morocco, North Africa, even in Iraq, etc. I'm not sure if they've lifted those bans now, but all of the masajid are closing, and it's the month of Quran, the month of Taraweeh. So we have to make sure that we turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and try to find an alternative. So there's no issue with praying at home, and there shouldn't be a difference of opinion over the numbers. And if someone wants to, if someone in regards to the masajid, if someone wants to pray 8, or they're following an imam who prays 8 in their masjid, the best thing to do is pray with the imam and not to make a dispute, not to cause disunity over opinions of fiqh. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to carry out that which we can.
Jazakallah khair, Ustad Ashraf. Reminds me of hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Before we carry on, brothers and sisters, inshallah, viewing this, you can send your questions via live chat, and inshallah we'll try and address your questions to the best of our ability, inshallah. So please, inshallah, do engage with us and ask any question that you want to ask. Ustad Ashraf reminded of a hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I think a hadith from Al-Bukhari and Muslim, where the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Man qama Ramadan إيمانا واحتسابا غفر له ما تقدم من ذنبه." أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. Whoever prays in the night, seeking out of iman in Allah Ta'ala, seeking rewards from Allah Ta'ala, then the sins will be forgiven. Their sins will be forgiven. So very important in terms of just the reward element. But I want to touch on 2 points, or ask Sheikh Mustafa and Ustad Sheikh Syed Maqsud Elahi as well. In terms of Sheikh Mustafa, from your angle, in terms of sometimes we have the essence of what ibadah is supposed to be for gets lost, and then we start arguing and fighting over the number of raka'ats. And Ramadan sometimes starts with what? Instead of love, unity and blessings, discussions, dialogues, debates and hatred. What's your view on that?
Human beings need something to be distracted by, so shaitan usually provides that in ample. Reality is that the problem that we have today is that worship has become something which is pretty much just a bunch of ritual acts where somebody does, and they begin with this act, and they do it according to whatever rules and regulations that they understand, and then they finish it, and then they just do the same thing over and over again. So it loses all of this, it loses the symbolic nature of what ibadah is supposed to be. Some of the early Muslims would always mention, and they would always say, Salli, and pray as if it's your last prayer. Salat muwaddi'in. So they would say always pray this prayer as if it's your last prayer. So that obviously involves a huge effort that the person needs to undertake in trying to build up a level of consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it means that having these debates and these discussions at a time when somebody's really supposed to be going into worship mode and trying to be reconnecting with their Lord, it shows you that their intention really isn't in the correct place at that time. And that could be for many reasons. It could be because of ignorance. It could be because they don't know any better. It could be because somebody never actually ever told them that this is not supposed to be it's not supposed to be, or this is not the way of the people of the past, and it's not the way pious people should behave. So usually sometimes boredom and many other things, virtue signaling and many other reasons could be why as to why people come out with all of these debates and all of these all of the argumentation and everything else. But the best advice that I would give myself, obviously first and foremost, because I feel like I'm lacking in many ways, is I would always say, don't forget the spirit of Ramadan. What is Ramadan supposed to be, and what did Ramadan mean for those people who came in the past, and the early Muslims and the righteous people and those who know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the arifin? How did they understand Ramadan? Have you ever seen any tradition from the early scholars talking about the fact that Imam Shafi'i would be in debates and would be talking to people in debate mode about how many raka'at there were, even though he had his opinion? Would Imam Abu Hanifa be doing the same thing? Would Imam Ahmed be doing any of the sort? Probably not. Most likely that wouldn't be the case at all. People had their opinions, but they had the maturity to be able to accept somebody else's opinion. So it meant that, you know what, even though I hold this opinion, I'm not going to debate about it because I understand this is all issues of ijtihad anyway. So the best thing we could do is that, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us an opportunity to be able to worship him. And that's all that we really need. If it's 8, if it's 20, like the majority of the scholars, the past and present, they all, like Imam Ashraf already mentioned, is that it's 20. But if somebody wants to pray 8, then there's no problem. If somebody wants to pray 4, there shouldn't be a problem. If somebody wants to pray 12 or whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them in terms of their capacity or their ability, then that's absolutely fine. But the most important thing is that you actually do the worship rather than focusing on debating on the worship and how to do the worship. Doing it as opposed to just talking about it. I think if we drill this information into the people and to ourselves first and foremost, I think maybe we would have a new way of looking at it.
Barakallah feekum, barakallah feekum. Jazakumullah khair, Sheikh Mustafa. Sheikh Sabir, I mean, this is again carrying on from what Imam Ashraf, Ustad Mustafa have mentioned. So the adadu raka'at are, you know, like 20, with the witr 23. And one of the reasoning behind this was to increase the standing and the recitation. This is one of the hikam. Some of the fuqaha mentioned that this is a time that we should recite more and stand more. So there should be more units of prayer. Saying this, some people who want to pray more, but they find themselves, you know what, I haven't memorized enough Quran. So at the same time, they want to recite more and stand more. Would it be okay from them to read from the Mushaf? Yeah, can they read from the Mushaf and lead, let's say, themselves or their family members in the home in Taraweeh? Sheikh Syed Maqsud Elahi.
First thing, just to make sure that some of the points from what we're discussing, Shakeel, that we might have some disagreement on this, because the disagreement is not we're making up from our pocket. It's the Aimma al-Mujtahideen, those who are the rightly guided, the scholars, and the Ummah unanimous, they agreed them as their understanding, as a right understanding, and their ruling is the right, the ruling for show the Ummah the right path. They have some disagreement, like just holding the Mushaf and praying. Abu Hanifa, according to him, is Salah is batil. Very straightforward. He has no like if or but thing. Now scholars explain this, why he put the ruling on this, the Salah being nullified, because holding the Mushaf. On the same way, we see that some other the scholars from the Fiqh al-Ahnaf, like Yusuf, of the main scholars from Ahnaf, they said no, it wouldn't be batil. But other Aimma, we see there's some differences among this. There again, first we have to understand the reading in the Salah. The scholars generally, those who are in favor of even holding the Mushaf, they say the first Salat, you shouldn't look at the Quran. Now, if you want to the nawafil, the option like, or the sunan like Salat Taraweeh or something, you know, they get the ruling from the Aisha radiallahu anhu, the Zakwan, he's a free slave, he led him in Salah. The scholar said sometimes he used to lead Salah, whatever he could memorize, he was memorized. He read that portion without looking. And the rest of the portion, he used to look at the Quran. Some scholars brought this out. I would advise you, those who are in favor of the opinion, that you can hold the Mushaf and read the Salah, and then lead the Salah. First, pray the Salah, the portion of Quran you know on this. For instance, you know last 10 surah. Okay, do this 10 surah from your hifz. Don't straight away from the beginning open the Quran. Okay, and those who are not in favor of this opinion, they can pray looking at the Mushaf. Then I would say you can keep repeating the surah you know. There's nothing wrong. Even if you know the 4th surah, just keep the 4th surah, go and back, and then keep repeating the surah. If you want 10, 20, whatever you want to do, likewise. And in that case, you can increase your time in sujood, in asking subhanahu. Both are meritorious. The man qama, this is when this is standing, is obviously it's related to standing, means still reciting more Quran, as you said rightly. But if I feel no, I might have losing the khushu in salah, then go sujood straight to the long prostration. This can be the way we can engage ourselves in ibadah as well, inshallah. Wallahu a'lam.
Barakallah feekum. I'll come to Sheikh Mustafa, Sheikh Ashraf, your take on what Imam Ashraf has mentioned, but there's a question that's come up from a viewer, and he or she is asking, this is not to do with salah, but recitation of Quran outside the prayer. They cannot recite the Quran in Arabic. And keep in mind, our Lucian community have a lot of new Muslims, reverts, converts, and so on. So they cannot read or recite the Quran in Arabic. will they get the same reward for reading the translation in the English language? Who wants to, Sheikh Ashraf, you want to tackle that one, please?
I think you have to look at it from two angles. Number one, as Ustad Mustafa mentioned earlier, the reason for the revelation of the Quran, and that is the for guidance and for seeking closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through guidance. And sometimes we have to look at the maqasid. Why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed so much reward in recitation of the Quran? The Quran, it purifies the heart just alone through its recitation, no doubt. And one of the reasons why we recite it, glorification of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, purification of the soul, to attain reward. But we have to ask the question, why is it that there is so much reward in recitation of the Quran? And where does the guidance through the Quran come from? Is it simply through the melodious recitation of the Quran without understanding of the meanings? And logically, no. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent the Quran with a meaning. So if a person reads the translation for the purpose of guidance, then bi'idhnillah, they'll have a great reward. But that entails trying to act upon what they are reading through understanding what the scholars have said about those verses. So in the month of Ramadan, if they were to read a chapter of the Quran a day, and they were to read it for the sake of guidance. So, they're reading about Jannah, they're reading about Jahannam, they're reading about Al-Akhirah, the last day, they're reading about the qualities of the pious, the qualities of the wicked, and so on and so forth. Then, of course, there will be a reward for them. But will that reward be the same reward as a person who reads in the Arabic language? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the Prophet ﷺ informed us that Allah will reward a person based upon his intention. And Allah can reward a person for one good deed 10 times, 70, 700, to an infinite amount. So if the person has a real intention for guidance, perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward this person more than the person who recites it in Arabic. That's one part. But the second part is, if a person cannot recite the Quran, then they need to work on that. So they need to either take time out during Ramadan or after Ramadan and work on learning how to recite the Quran. And now, whilst we're in isolation, it's an ideal opportunity. Why? Because you can take 20 minutes a day to follow an online class, to sign up for an online Quran recitation class. There are so many available right now. And you can learn tajweed, you can learn to read the Arabic language, you can go online and you can follow so many videos, you can purchase books which teach you how to read step by step. So really, if we're honest, that we don't really have any excuse in our day and age. The resources are available. And so a person needs to definitely take time to learn. And in fact, that is something which is fardu ayn, to learn how to recite the Quran to the best of their ability, in relation to that which is enough for them to pray. That's something which is fardu ayn. It's compulsory upon the individual to do so. There's no excuse. And then after that, it's something which is recommended to be able to recite the Quran, the complete Quran. So that's the two angles that I would look at it from. Can a person receive the same reward? It depends on their intention, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ar-Rahman. We don't have the right to deny someone that reward. But being sincere and truthful with ourselves, we should say that it's not good enough that a person can't read the Quran in our day and age. They have to force themselves and push themselves. And there are many people, for example, from Lewisham, they learn how to recite the Quran in a few months. In a few months, they learn how to recite the Quran. And there are individuals that I know, Ustad Mustafa knows, I'm sure Sheikh Sabir, Imam Shakeel know some of these individuals or know of others who memorized the entire Quran. They entered into Islam and memorized the Quran in 6 months to a year. There is no excuse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given all of us the ability when it comes to his book. It's just about determination and willpower and dedication to learning.
Barakallah feek, Ustad Ashraf. Sheikh Mustafa, I'm just going back to Sheikh Syed Maqsud's Elahi's point concerning the reading from the Mushaf. Alhamdulillah, we're on lockdown and we're separated. Otherwise, you guys could have had a physical fight. But alhamdulillah, you're far apart.
Alhamdulillah.
Sheikh Syed mentioned in terms of in the Hanafi kind of like school of thought, that this is not something which is acceptable. Do you agree in terms of the Shafi school of thought? Is that the same view?
Usually in the Shafi'i school or in the Shafi'i legal tradition, we have a principle that mentions that anything which is considered to be a amal kathir, which is incorporating a huge amount of actions within the prayer, nullifies the prayer. And a small amount, or qalilul amal, or doing a small amount of actions doesn't nullify the prayer. But then what the fuqaha usually mention is that the way in which we determine what's a huge amount of actions that we do that's incorporated in the prayer as opposed to a small amount is always based on the customary traditions of the society that you live in. So having said that, I mean, do we in London consider that to be an action which is offensive? If somebody were to pick up the Mushaf today and to read the Quran, or the Imam were to do something like that, I think it's something that maybe many masjids have become accustomed to. So also taking into consideration the fact that we're living in times in which there's not many people who maybe know much of the Quran, or there may be not people who have access to people who know much of the Quran. And especially nowadays, maybe when there's a lockdown and maybe you're living in a household where somebody maybe hasn't learned the Quran, if it makes it a little bit easier for a person to use the Mushaf in the prayer, for example, I think maybe a leeway in taking it easy in such a way, or using that as a concession to enable somebody to pray Salah would probably not be an issue, personally speaking. However, depending on the parameters set up by the madhab, I really wouldn't know where exactly we can fit this into. I would have to probably take a survey, and that's something that I haven't done, and it's something research hasn't allowed me to do that at this current time. But who knows? Allahu a'lam. I have some of the mu'asirin, or the contemporary scholars, have made have given certain answers of some fatwa. You'd find some of them, they say it's not a problem, and you find some of them, I've seen some who say that you cannot do it whatsoever, and they incline more towards the Hanafi madhab. So I don't think it's something which is agreed upon anyway. But to make it easier for the people, I'd probably say that if it's something that would enable somebody to actually pray, just something I think it's a goal in of in itself, we can get somebody to actually pray. If it means that they can actually read Quran in the month of Ramadan in Taraweeh, if it means that they need to pick up Mushaf, personally, I would be inclined to say, Bismillah, go ahead and do it, inshallah, bi'idhnillah. Wallahu a'lam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best.
Barakallah feekum. Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Mustafa, for that response. Inshallah,
Sorry, can I just add something? In relation to the previous discussion on the number rak'at, adad rak'at, yani the Taraweeh. I've seen something now which, like, subhanallah, it's interesting that one thing is taken away, our ability to argue over the number of rak'at is taken away, and so we find something new to argue about. And now people are arguing about praying behind an imam via an online recitation, or and of course it's a fiqhi issue, and according to what I have read in the Hanafi, the Hanbali, the Shafi'i madhab, it wouldn't be permissible anyway to do so. But those that do give that opinion, and I'm talking about from the scholars, from contemporary scholars who have given that leeway to people, you can follow an imam online, follow us online, and so on and so forth. I think we have to, again, it's about that mindset of adopting that mindset of respecting the room for difference of opinion, especially in new areas. So some of the reasonings people are coming with is our circumstances are unprecedented, and so on and so forth. Whether or not those are valid reasons, it's besides the point. But now, rather than discuss these things with manners and etiquettes of Islam, people online are arguing, and sometimes students of knowledge are arguing in the same manner that they would argue about the 8 versus the 11, the 20 rak'at. And so it's a real shame that we go into the month of Ramadan, rather than taking heed from what's happened to us, we're arguing about another issue. And again, I'm not validating that opinion, but it's a real shame to see that this is happening. And so I would advise, like anyone that is within any circles that are arguing about these things, to keep out of it and to stay out of it, especially in the month of Ramadan. And what is worse is when people start to mock other people, when individuals are mocking other people. Oh, how can he come out with such a ruling, and this shows this person has know this and know that. It's not correct. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran not to look down or to mock others. And so it's a point that I wanted to add, because it's something we're not arguing about at 8 and 20, but now we're arguing about this.
Jazakallah khair. I think very important point, Sheikh Ashraf, that you mentioned. And I think that mind change, that change of mind and mindset that needs to be changed is very, very important. I'm sure when you were speaking, I was reflecting on our brothers in Gaza, our brothers in Syria, in refugee camps, our brothers in Kashmir on a lockdown, our brothers in Rohingya, the Rohingya Muslims, our brothers in the China, the Uyghur Muslims. I'm sure they're not having these arguments. Because the situation doesn't permit them to have these arguments, because they've got greater things to focus on, and they're part of our ummah. That means if they're facing hardship and difficulty, we should be facing the same difficulty and hardship, and focus on those things which really should be a priority to ourselves. And sadly, when we get into these kind of argumentation and then mocking and then belittling, it shows how far we've gone away from those mannerisms, the characteristics of our beloved Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the Sahaba, and the scholars of the past, the 4 Imams and so on. So, Jazakallah khair for that reminder. Moving on, Sheikh Ashraf, just a question from a sister here. The sister's asking, she starts reciting Quran, and then during the Ramadan, her cycle comes. Can she carry on reciting the Quran? I'm adding, she just asked that question. I'm going to add something to it. Can she recite the Quran touching the Mushaf? Or question, another one, can she recite the Quran without touching, but just reciting it from memory?
So it's a sensitive question, and sometimes controversial with some. But Imam Shakeel, if I may, I would prefer to refer this question to Sheikh Sabir, as he is that his field is the Quran, and it would be wrong of me to speak about the Quran when he has the right to do so.
I would say we have Sheikh Mustafa who would join us on this discussion as well. But I would say this is very important. If that safer side, again, you said this controversial scholars discussed in detail. Some said yes, you can reform the memory. Some said no. Some said you can touch it. In teaching purpose, some allowed this. So number of points. Since it's an on air, I would say that when you cycle, you start to stay away from the fasting, the salah, and reciting the Quran. Okay. Pause for this. Why? This is because once your period go back to normal, your life, inshallah, resume from there you stopped. This is my I follow this opinion, but I'm not saying this is the only opinion. Again, obviously the scholars have wide discussed this issue. I personally follow this opinion. That time you should pause, but you have all the other doors are open for ibadah. Your adhkar, your understanding, the go over the tafsir, listen lecture, everything is open. Even you can listen. It's not like listen, stop, just carry on. Only you don't touch and don't read. Wallahu ta'ala alam.
Barakallah fikum, Sheikh Syed. Sheikh Mustafa, you want to add anything to that?
Want to add to this one? Just I'm not saying it's just completely attached to this question. I think it's the question that before you raised. Just to clarifying the point, the reading the translation is the same reward as the one thing we have to understand: translation and transliteration. So I see some brothers in the masjid, for instance, they're reading the Arabic in English, for instance, A'udhu billahi minash, that way. So transliteration is not allowed. All the scholars, they completely agreed that you shouldn't read Quran in different language. Okay, so if the brother meant this question by this, okay, reading the transliteration is giving the same reward, this shouldn't be done. First, okay, you give your effort to learn the Quran and also try and understand as much as possible, inshallah. But this is why you can attach yourself with the Quran. Allahu A'lam.
So for the viewers, sometimes with the transliteration, there'll be letters which are Ain, Dad, Sad, Ghain, which in the translation, you're not going to get Dhal and so on. So sometimes when you do kind of like read with transliteration, these are like English letters, but you're trying to pronounce in Arabic. the meaning sometimes change and it becomes a bit problematic. Inshallah, Sheikh Mustafa, there's a lot of questions coming in. So I wanted you to address that one. Maybe if we have time, we'll come back to that issue. But a question here for Sheikh Mustafa here is, I'm a frontline physiotherapist treating coronavirus patients at the moment, and I work full time. I'm currently off sick. Can I be excused from fasting?
That's a very good question. My advice would always be, if you're feeling sick to the point where you feel like you would, by fasting it would diminish your power to an extent where you'd be seriously in harm, then do not fast. And make it up on another day, inshallah, whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you the ability or the opportunity to do so, whenever you get better, whenever you're feeling better. But especially considering the fact that this is a type of virus, and obviously I'm not a doctor, so I wouldn't really be able to give any medical advice. But from what I've read and what I've been told by doctors is that this is a type of virus that attacks the immune system, and it causes a lot of problems, and especially if somebody has an immunodeficiency. So a person will probably obviously be, if somebody's sick, they probably need to be eating, they probably need to be replenished, they probably need to be taking extra care of themselves, per the advice of the NHS. So my advice would definitely be that if a person feels like it could in any way be a danger to their lives by fasting, then probably not to fast would probably be the best solution. That's if they're feeling sick already. And inshallah, whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you the opportunity to make up those fasts again, inshallah, in the future, then do so. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakumullah khair. Similar questions. A lot of people sending messages in terms of messages and questions related to sickness. So Sheikh Ashraf, I think two are related. They're similar, two questions. I am unwell. I have a weak immune system. I feel fatigue. I get fever. What's the ruling concerning fasting? Yeah, so somebody who's sick, maybe the sickness is a bit kind of like extreme, the fever is excessive, and the immune system is very weak. What's the ruling concerning them fasting? Should they fast? And if they don't fast, are they excused? And what should they do in that case?
So according to the Hanafi madhab, and the Hanbali madhab is very similar. If a person is sick, then there are principles in relation to when they can break their fast and when they're excused from fast. Number one, if their fast is going to delay their recovery, so if their fasting is going to delay their ability to recover, then they're excused from fasting. And number two, if their sickness is chronic, so it's something which they do not have the ability to recover from anyway. So for example, diabetes, blood pressure, it could be anemia, for example. Perhaps a person is extremely anemic. It could be a heart condition, it could be anything, any type of illness which is chronic. It's something which they have for life. Then they are excused from fasting completely. And in fact, with both of these situations, the person who fasting will delay their recovery, and the other one, the chronic person, the chronically ill person, if they were to fast and the fasting were to put their life in danger, then this would actually be considered something sinful. It would be considered haram. So for example, if a person is diabetic and they have a lot of zeal and passion, and they really want to fast, but they know that fasting could potentially bring real harmful risk to their life. If they were to fast, it would be considered something haram, and it would be considered a sin. So a person would have to judge their own situation. If I have a cold, I may be able to fast. It won't. I'm going to get over the cold whether I fast or not, and it doesn't diminish me so much so that I feel I'm putting myself at risk or at danger. But for example, if it's a virus, as Ustad Mustafa said, and my immune system needs to fight that virus, then fasting could potentially inhibit my immune system's ability to fight against the virus. So therefore, I would be excused from fasting. So the main principle is فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the best of your ability. you know your own situation and judge your own situation accordingly. If need be, seek medical advice. As they say, how is it that you know that an illness is going to put you at risk, or it's going to delay, fasting is going to delay your recovery? It's either through tajribah or through through experience, or through understanding what you're going through, you've been through it before, or it's through medical advice, through seeking sound, trustworthy medical advice. So those are the options that a person who is ill would have.
Barakallah feekum, Sheikh Ashraf. I think important answer and quite in depth as well. A person has a question here, Sheikh Sabir, if you can answer this one, Sheikh Sayyid Maqsud Elahi, in terms of they're asking, after Ramadan, how can a person keep consistency in terms of what they've already started? They might have started making, Taraweeh, Qiyamul Layl, they're fasted, they're reading a lot of Quran, they're giving a lot of sadaqah. What is the best way of them remaining consistent in terms of continuing those good deeds?
First thing I would say, in discouraging note, but it's the reality. First thing you have to understand, you can't keep the same standard, what in your life, the cycle, the practice, or your a'mal, your actions, the same as outside Ramadan. There are a number of points there, because sufilat shayatin, as you mentioned the hadith, all the major enemies are chained up. So there will be less distraction in Ramadan. So what's going to happen after Ramadan? They will be free. So you basically in front of the bigger enemies and encountering the prime or the major players that you're trying to divert you. So it's Ramadan. I say that always that it's like a battery charge in a way that it should lead you at least to next 11 months. By the time your battery gone down, next Ramadan you make dua Allah maballighna Ramadan. Next Ramadan recharge yourself. Now, as you said, how can we continue this? The bar we put up well in the Ramadan in terms of our ibadah. If one thing you need to prioritize in your routine after Ramadan, that since I managed to stay up 3, 4, 5 hours in the night, is it too difficult for me to wake up maybe half an hour before Fajr again after Ramadan? I managed to read every day 5 juz, 3 juz, 2 juz. Is it going to be too difficult for me to read 1 juz a day after Ramadan? I just spent, mashallah, every night I see the charity appeal on TV, or in other way I donated money. For instance, the part I spend £100 a week, 50, 500 pounds, whatever. It's too difficult to spend this flow of £5, £10 every other day or every other week to spend in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When I see it's completely on dead stop, that means I have to question myself. Did I focus on my ibadah correctly in Ramadan? Or it just as your vibe comes on and then gone, season finished, I came back to a normal person. Just to add to this, sometimes the people ask how do I know that my Ramadan or the fasting has been accepted? The scholars said very nicely. They said one thing: if you see your pre-status of your life is different, so your post-status of your life, post-status of the Ramadan is different from pre-Ramadan life, then you can, and it's in a better way, then you can hope, alhamdulillah, your fasting is accepted. So when you see that that's my the speed up whatever in every part of the ibadah, recitation, your qiyam, standing, in the charity, in everything, every aspect is flowing after Ramadan. It might be not the same ratio, but still it should continue. You might have the checklist, you can make it, okay, this week I'm going to pray, finish that many juz, that much I would just tick box. And inshallah, once you get used to, it would be difficult for you to come out from the track, inshallah. Allah ta'ala.
Barakallah feekum, Sheikh Sayyid Maqsud Elahi. Inshallah, viewers, inshallah, if you have any questions, please send them along, inshallah, via live chat. Inshallah, we'll try and address, inshallah, those questions. One more question from a sister, Sheikh Mustafa. Inshallah, if you can address this one. I'm a pregnant woman. Do you have to make up the days for fasting, or is giving charity permissible and enough? What's the ruling concerning this? And inshallah, I mean, if there is a difference of opinion between the madhahib, then maybe Sheikh Ashraf can give his kind of like view, or Sheikh Sayyid Maqsud Elahi, and so on. So please, Sheikh Mustafa, yourself first.
Jazakallah khair, Imam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions in the Quran, فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this verse in the Quran, He mentions the principle of qada, which is making up the fast that you've missed. If a person missed any fasts during Ramadan for whatever reason that they may have been, say for example, a woman who's pregnant or a woman who's breastfeeding, for example, by default of by mere fact of missing certain fasts, she's going to have to make it at a later date, whenever the possibility, whenever the opportunity allows her to do so. Usually in the Shafi'i legal tradition, we make a distinction between whether or not that the reason why she didn't fast or on those days that she missed was due to her own issues or her own situation, or in the interests of her child or her children. If that's the case, if it's only for her own interest, it was something that was an issue only pertaining to her, then usually in the legal tradition, they mentioned that what she would have to do then is that she would make up the fasts, and she would also pay a ransom or a fee or feed a poor person, as opposed to if it was because of the interests of the child. Wallahu a'lam. But just generally speaking, no matter what happens, whatever the circumstances may be, usually the principle of qada, it always applies if somebody misses their fasting. The only time a person doesn't have to perform a qada, or they don't have to make up a fasting which they've missed, is only due to if they have a sickness in which, like Imam Ashraf said, it's chronic and there is no way in which this person would ever recover. Only those circumstances a person would pay the fee of feeding a poor person for each day that they've missed. Otherwise, whenever they do recover, whenever their circumstances do change, they make up the fast no matter what happens. And depending on the circumstances, they add a fee that they pay or they don't. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Mustafa. Sheikh Ashraf, in terms of your view from another perspective, is there another view in terms of, from let's say some of the other madahib, some of the other schools of thought? And also with that, inshallah, if there is another view, I want you to touch on, is it better for a person to stick to one madhab, one school of thought concerning these issues? Because sometimes for lay people, it becomes very confusing. This opinion, that, you have 5 opinions flying around. Is it sometimes safer and better to say, look, this is what I learned, this is what it's in my school of thought, I should stick to it? Yeah. So firstly, inshallah, in terms of what Sheikh Mustafa has mentioned, are you in agreement from another, let's say, perspective, from a fiqh perspective?
So just to simplify the issue, there, as you mentioned, there's a difference of opinion between the fuqaha generally, but within the Hanafi madhab, there's a very important principle, and within the madhab and within all of the madhab, really, they differentiate between studying and between giving fatwa, giving rulings. And so you'll find that a mufti, someone that gives a ruling, even though he may base his rulings upon a madhab, he may go out of the madhab at times, or he may select an opinion from one of the a'imma from within the madhab due to the circumstance of the person who is asking. It's referred to as adabul ifta or qawa'idul ifta, the principles of giving rulings. And so there's a very important principle within the Hanafi madhab, which is yustahabbu al-khuruj min al-khilaf, that it's highly recommended that a person avoids the area of khilaf. How? By taking the safest opinion. So here, for example, if because due to the nature of the sensitivity of the issue, it's about the one of the arkan of Islam, Ramadan. It would be best if a person can afford to pay fidya, to pay the fidya and to make up the days of fasting, if they can afford it. If they can't afford it, then that's something else. Inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-afu. He loves to overlook and to forgive and to be merciful. But if a person can afford to give fidya, then I would say that they give the fidya and they make up their days of fasting. If they can't afford to give fidya, then make up the days of fasting, and bi'idhnillah, Allah will have mercy upon them. But going back to the issue, there's a famous faqih from the fuqaha of the Ahnaf, and he's quite contemporary. He died, I think, 200 years ago or so, and he says something. He basically he categorizes the opinions of the fuqaha into three categories. He says you have those that take the opinion which is al-aysar, those that take the opinion which is al-ahwat, and the third category is mattufiqa alayh. He says the first is those scholars that take the easiest option when giving fatwa. They give people the easiest option. They try to make the deen as easy as possible. Then you have those that give the people the safest opinion. They try to give the people the safest opinions in the deen when giving fatwa. And then you have the third category, which is what has been agreed upon according to all of the madhabs anyway. And he said that equal, I think, 1 or 2/3 of fiqh is agreed upon. And so in the other areas, the they simply give that which is easier or that which is safest, and both approaches are approaches which are valid in Islam. And you have some of the great ai that have taken these opinions. One of the students of Imam Ahmed, he narrated that someone came to him and asked him for fatwa, and he directed him to another scholar who was sitting close by to him, and he said, go to this person and ask this person, because my opinions are too difficult for you to follow. And so the individual was directed by Imam Ahmed himself to someone else, because Imam Ahmed knew the circumstance of this individual, and he knew that the opinions that he himself is inclined towards would be too difficult for this individual to follow. Sometimes I think we as I believe Ustad Mustafa or yourself, Imam Shakeel, mentioned, we get tangled up in the theory of Islam, and we lose the spirit of Islam. The spirit of Islam is connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The spirit of Islam is refinement of the self. And if a person is doing that consistently through some of the easier opinions which are valid, they're not, and when I say easier opinions, I don't mean, tatabbu'u rukhas, following the areas where we've been given excuses. I mean following valid, easy opinions according to a scholar, then others shouldn't be harsh against them. Likewise, if a person is following a madhab wherein they're following the safest opinion, others shouldn't be harsh with them, because the point is getting towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the paths that lead to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they vary. So as long as a person is following a scholar or a madhab, then we should be easy with each other. But as for the last part of the question, following a madhab, following one madhab is the easiest approach. The purpose of Islam is not, our purpose is not to find the haqq within the haqq. The purpose of Islam is to follow al-haqq, which is Islam, to follow the truth, which is Islam. As for how we follow Islam, we have been charged with the responsibility of following the way of the Prophet ﷺ according to the understanding of the companions, and that understanding was compiled for us by the four Imams of fiqh: Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i, and Imam Ahmed. So if a person follows any one of these madhabs, alhamdulillah, they're following the truth. And it's not for the lay person, and we have to know our positions, our levels. I myself, I would classify myself as a lay person. I'm not going to go to the Quran and the Sunnah and try to derive rulings myself. It's like a beginner level student going to the not the books of medicine, but the books of philosophy from which medicine is derived, and they're trying to come up with their own methodology of practicing medicine. So it's about being humble enough to know our places and seeing what the real purpose behind worship is: to get close to Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need us to place our hands above our navel or under our navel. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need us to follow a particular opinion over another opinion. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to see us worshipping Him to the best of our capacity according to the understanding of the companions. So any madhab that a person follows, alhamdulillah, it's a blessing, and bi'idhnillah, they're all following the truth.
Barakallah feek. Barakallah feek.
Imam, I just wanted to clarify the Shafi'i legal tradition in regards to the, I just want to quickly mention, when it comes to somebody who's not feeling well, the basic principle is that everybody has to do qada. Anybody who misses any fasting, whatever the reason may be, they need to make it up at a later day if they have the ability to do so. Usually they go into a little bit more detail concerning the woman who's pregnant or breastfeeding because she's taking care of somebody or her child. And what they usually mention is that if she breaks her fast because of the interests of the child and the child alone, then it means that along with making up the fast, she also pays a fidya. As opposed to if she breaks the fast because she feels that it's a danger to her own life. In that case, what she would do is she would make up the fast and the fast alone, and that's it. So that's the only point when it comes to the breastfeeding or the pregnant woman. In relation to somebody who's passed away, say for example, somebody who's passed away, what's the ruling relating to somebody who's missed a lot of fasting and they've passed away suddenly, for example? Usually in the legal tradition, they mention the fuqaha and they say that somebody who's in that situation, يَصُومُ عَنْهُ وَلِيُّهُ, somebody who's a responsible person would fast on their behalf. So if somebody could do that, that would be, in the Shafi'i legal tradition, the new madhab or madhab al-jadid, which is not considered to be the official opinion or the official madhab, even though it's Imam Shafi'i's new opinion, is that somebody pays a fidya on their behalf for each day that they've missed. But the qadim or the old opinion, which is the old madhab, which is the official opinion, is that somebody fasts on their behalf. So if anybody has somebody who's already passed away and they've missed some fasting from the past, it would be more appropriate for somebody to fast on their behalf according to the legal tradition. So somebody who could find out possibly and do some kind of calculation and estimation as to how much this person who's passed away, how many fasts have they missed from previous Ramadans, maybe, whatever the case may be, take a note of that, inshallah, and resume those fastings, inshallah, on their behalf, maybe after Ramadan, inshallah, whenever the person has an ability to do so. Allahu a'lam.
Barakallah fikum. Jazakumullah khair. A few more questions coming in, brothers. So a question here is, what is the best dua to make in the month of Ramadan? What is the best dua, supplication to make in the month of Ramadan? Sheikh Sabir, Sheikh Syed, Maqsud, any advice on that?
First, it's another, the Ramadan's name of the Ramadan month of dua. Any dua you could make. Regarding individual need, you can still make dua. But one the Prophet have particularly mentioned in Laylatul Qadr, what we find from the authentic Sunnah is Allahumma afu, Allahumma inna afoon tuhibbul afwa fa'fu anni. This is the dua for Laylatul Qadr. But other days, mostly your dua should be focused on your forgiveness. Whatever you make dua, if you just to ask one dua, in today I'm just opening up the first dua, should I do? Allahumma maghfirli. And then you start any other thing. Because when you attain the maghfirah, you attain everything. So this encompasses everything. So I wouldn't say any particular wording that dua should put in. There's a number of dua in the Quran, in the hadith, you can learn from them and read. And if you say, no, in 2 minutes I want to make something very quick, Allahumma maghfirli. Say first, forgive me, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the dua, and the Ramadan is every night. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala frees the slave who are destined to hellfire. Frees them every night. The hadith is mentioned is every night. It's not just end of Ramadan. So every night Allah is open up the people out of it, and you just try to be one of them. That's it, inshallah. Allah.
Just reminding me of a true funny story related to dua. That's how I'm relating it, inshallah. So I think the key essence here is dua should be what you want from Allah Ta'ala. What you want from Allah, ask. If it's forgiveness, if it's tawbah, if it's a blessing, if it's anything you want from Allah, make that dua. But it's a true funny story. One of the brothers was telling me Ramadan. So what do you think, brothers? What's the most important thing they want, Mashayikh? Marriage, yeah. That's like, so this brother started first Ramadan, every salah, every sujood, every dua, adhan and iqamah, Allah please, I want wife, righteous, pious, beauty, every dua. Qiyamul Layl, last 10 nights, Laylatul Qadr. He said to me, Subhanallah, Ramadan finished, Eid day, he got a call from a brother, I have a sister for you who's interested in marriage. So it shows you the power of dua, brothers and sisters. Yeah? So inshallah, yes. So whatever you want from Allah Ta'ala, please make that dua. Question here in terms of medications. With regards to medications such as nasal sprays, such as inhalers while you're fasting, eye drops and so on, do they break the fast? Who wants to take on this one? Sheikh Ashraf?
Rashid, I'll defer it to Mustafa.
Sheikh Mustafa?
When it comes
Are
to
you the one who said the easiest one, the safest one, the hardest one? Which one are you?
I'll try and be somewhere in the middle, inshallah. So I can get both sides, inshallah, both camps, inshallah, happy.
Inshallah.
When it comes to usually according to our legal tradition and those of our companions, and especially those of the Shafi'i madhab, we usually say things like anything which is يدخل في منفذ مفتوح, anything which is an open cavity, like the nose, for example, or the mouth, or anything which goes from the exterior into the interior, would break the fast. And that's not something only related, by the way, to something that's edible or something that's usually consumed. Even some of the scholars, for example, if you read the book Kifayat al-Akhyar, the author Taqiyuddin al-Hisni, he even mentions, and he says, if somebody were to take, for example, a needle and insert it into their chest or into their stomach, that would constitute a breaking of the fast. And the reason why that is because something from an exterior, from the external, has now entered into the temple of the body. And if something like that happens, it breaks the fast, whatever the case may be. So it doesn't matter whether that's food that's usually consumed, or whether that's water, whatever the case may be. The legal tradition doesn't consider the eyes to be something which is an open cavity. So if somebody were to use eye drops, that's not a problem, as opposed to a nasal spray and something that they would take by the mouth. So they make a distinction between those. So usually anything, so long as it's something, the Prophet ﷺ, he gives us also a principle, and he mentioned, and this is something which is very important also in the Shafi'i legal tradition, because they consider that to be an authentic statement from him alayhi salatu wasalam. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, وَبَالِغْ فِي الْإِسْتِنْشَاقِ إِلَّا أَن تَكُونَ صَائِمًا, which means when a person's making their wudu, make sure you emphasize when you're putting the water in your mouth and when you're putting the water in your nose. And then he said, alayhi salatu wasalam, except if you're fasting. And the mafhum, or the implicit understanding of the hadith, is that because obviously if you insert it and you sniff in the water too much and it goes up into your sinuses, then it has that risk of going down your throat and then going into the interior. And once that happens, according to the fuqaha, then the fasting is broken. Prophet ﷺ wouldn't have warned us about doing something like that had there not been a danger that the person's fasting would have been impacted or adversely affected. So long as a person avoids anything that has a direct route into the body cavity or into the temple of the body, then a person needs to make sure that they avoid that at all costs. If this medication is something that the medical advisors tell you and they say that this is something that you need, and if you were not to take this type of medication, it would have an adverse impact on your health, then that person doesn't need to fast at all. Okay? That's also a very important point, because if it's something in which the person needs to take in order to live a normal life, or it would have an impact, or it would be something which could threaten their lives, then in such a situation that person would be obligated by the religion, as Imam Ashraf already mentioned, that person is not supposed to fast at all, and it would be an act which is impermissible for them to do so. Wallahu a'lam.
Barakallah feekum. Sheikh Ashraf, want to add anything to that?
Not really, Imam Shakeel. I mean, the in the Hanafi madhab, they differentiate between that which provides nutrition to the body and that which doesn't provide nutrition to the body. So there's that distinction. But as for like injections and medication, etc., I'm not confident to give any opinions on that issue personally, as it's a contemporary issue. So perhaps Sheikh Sabir can clarify.
No, the principle you mentioned, or intravascular, intravenous, whatever you put, it gives the nutrition, it breaks the fast, regardless of. what type. So this is the principle. You have to ask the doctor, does he give the nutrition, any sort of nutrition? If the doctor said, yeah, yes, then you will break your fast. Allah ta'ala.
Sheikh Sabir, question for you here, inshallah. In terms of praying in Jummah at home, the father is leading or a man is leading. He makes a mistake in qira'ah recitation. Can a female member of the family correct the recitation loudly?
What's the principle of in Sharia person told us in the Athar we found a number of incidents like this. If you make mistake in Salah, the women are supposed to clap on the back of the hand. So in terms of recitation, they shouldn't recite out loud. What's the scholars give the opinion? I follow this opinion. But there are other scholars, they said, oh, if there is no non-mahram present there, nobody could listen, then she can. But I'm not very keen on this, the opinion, as I couldn't get into the depth. But the scholars, those who said, if the sisters, if the women try to correct Imam's mistakes, whether in recitation or whether in raka'ah, for instance, you're about to do this, the sit down, you're standing up. If she wants to correct the Imam, just that clap on the back of her hand. One thing we should remember also, that if Imam mistakes in recitation doesn't mean I have to correct it. Okay? If Imam reads one ayah correctly in Salah, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu ittaqullaha haqqa tuqatih wa la tamutunna illa wa antum muslimun. He recited this verse. That rak'ah is valid. If he mistakes the following verse, and then if you mistake, sometimes this happens in our of the masjid as well, and so many places. Imam makes one mistake, and there are 5 brothers and sisters, you shout out this way. You don't have to correct in Imam recitation straight away. What we do in the khatm of the Quran in Taraweeh, this is because of the completion of the Quran. This is what the Huffaz usually correct. But in general, if at home, if the very likely if they're not the Huffaz, anybody from the family, then they might read any other surah. If you make mistake, let the head of the family, the father or the brother, carry on the salah, and after salah you can tell him, or you read this ayah mistake. This is very common. I would say that the belief, we think that reciting of the salah, we have to correct it. No, you don't have to correct it. You have to let it go. Okay. So this is sort of the destruction in the salah, making the correcting, keep correcting the imam. Again, I'm not attaching to the khatm of the Quran in Taraweeh. That's different. Okay. So I would say that, sister, if your father, your husband make mistake, just clap it. If he takes the caution from you, he understood, you would correct. Otherwise, after the taslim, you can tell him, okay, you said this, you're supposed to say that ayah like this. Allahu A'lam.
Jazakumullah khair, inshallah. Barakallah feekum.
So, Imam Shakeel, could I just add something to that,
Yes,
please? Just because of the nature of the households, if I could just add to what Sheikh Sabir mentioned, that as the man has been made the imam of the household, if he's leading the salah and his wife follows, because there are sisters that may follow opinions that differ from their husbands, for example. If someone is married, if someone comes from, due to the nature of our marriages, you have, multiple, ethnicities. And so if, say, let's
not go into that.
Let's say, for example, if a sister follows a particular opinion and the husband follows something that is contrary to that opinion, then the wife should respect the husband's opinion and follow what he would like her to follow in that particular situation. Why? Because he is the imam of the salah, and so she should follow her imam. And so if the husband, for example, would like her to correct him, perhaps it may be wise for her to correct him. If he does not want her to correct him, perhaps it will be wise that she doesn't correct him. Why? Because we're in isolation. Everyone's, slightly on edge. And I don't think you want any more phone calls, Imam Shakeel. So I think we have to kind of keep the situation as calm as possible.
MashaAllah. Jazakallah khair. Barakallah feekum. A question here from one of the viewers concerning Zakat al-Fitr. Is the masjid collecting Zakat al-Fitr? Yes, we are collecting Zakat al-Fitr, even though the masjid is closed. You can do it, inshallah, online. And inshallah, we will try and distribute the Zakat al-Fitr locally. So many of our, especially sisters, especially revert sisters who might be single parents, we'll try and help them, inshallah, this Eid, inshallah. So we are collecting Zakat al-Fitr. You can do it online. Please make sure you mark ZF. I think Zakatul Fitr, that's the color, put ZF to it, and that will be for Zakatul Fitr fund. We will inshallah purchase food items and inshallah distribute that to our revert sisters and single parents in our community and so on, inshallah. Mashayikh, Jazakumullah khair, inshallah. A lot of questions are coming in. There's a question here concerning Itikaf, in terms of, is Itikaf, or you have to follow the respect one another if the husband and wives differ. But can Itikaf be done in the houses? And the questioner is saying they've heard it can be done, but from their knowledge and understanding, it can only be done in masajid. So I don't know who wants to take this one, inshallah. Sheikh Mustafa, Itikaf in houses, not in masajid, can it be done?
According to the Shafi'i legal tradition, it cannot be done. And that's simply because it's actually nasan in the Quran. It's actually mentioned directly in the Quran. وَأَنْتُمْ عَاكِفُونَ فِي الْمَسَاجِدِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions al-i'tikaf as being in the masajid. So when many of the scholars, they looked into the verse, they mentioned and they said that.
So you're a hardliner now. I thought you said you're in the middle.
You know the Shafi'i madhab, it has a lot of diversification. In some areas, subhanallah, you find it, wow, it's so liberal. And in some other areas, subhanallah, so conservative. So it takes elements of each. But mashallah, when it comes to the issue of al-i'tikaf, i'tikaf is a privilege that's usually only held in masajid, and that's according to the sound tradition, the legal tradition, because of the verse in the Quran. And even they go a bit further and they say, for example, anybody who is in a situation which they're not allowed to be in a masjid for whatever the case may be, i.e. due to purification or janaba, that means they need to exit the masjid. And they also mention also masail connected to that, saying, for example, if a person is in a masjid and that masjid doesn't perform the Jum'ah prayer, it would mean that they would have to go and break i'tikaf and go to a masjid which is considered to be a jami', because in the West, obviously it's a bit different, but usually in the Muslim world, usually you have like neighborhoods where there's many masajid, and then you have one main mosque called the jami', which is the place where, or the masjid where the Jum'ah prayer is performed. So usually what the fuqaha, they say is all of those, if somebody is performing an itikaf in one of those small masajid, what they do is they break off and they go to the jami'. But coming back to the main point, according to the legal tradition, there is no itikaf at home. At home is always itikaf. It should be in a state of itikaf at all times, really, because that's the place where we're supposed to be remembering Allah. And I mean, look, let's take the spirit of itikaf. What's the point of itikaf in the first place? The point of doing itikaf is so a person could distract themselves from anything which would usually cause them any disturbance whilst they're from their dunya. And that's why they would go to the masjid, and that's why they would do itikaf, so they can spend more time with the Quran, and then they can spend more time learning, and they can spend more time making dua, they can spend more time doing good deeds, they can spend more time in doing all of the things that they couldn't do during the year. Because we're in lockdown anyway, and we're in the homes, why don't we make the home an environment in which it would be conducive to itikaf anyway? So that means all of the distractions that a person usually would have had at home, like the television, for example, or the phone, especially on social media and all of these different distractions, why don't we put them all to the side for a second and just take out the Quran and focus on the Quran and focus on doing ibadah and all of that. So we take the spirit of i'tikaf. It might not be an i'tikaf to our liking, it might not be in a masjid, but we could always make the environment that we're in into an environment which is conducive to i'tikaf. So do everything that you would have done in the masjid, do it at home and make the home that environment. And also encourage everybody else at home to also do the same thing and say, for example, look, and have a discussion, all of us were at home together, especially during the last 10 nights. Some of us probably would have had the privilege to go to the masjid. Because we don't this year, let's all make it an opportunity where we do all of the things we would have done, and let's do it at home. Who knows, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might put so much barakah in such an intention that it might be something which is which changes their lives forever. Might be a new connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they've never had before. Only this is something that's unprecedented. We didn't really go through something like this in recent history. So many opportunities could be harvested simply because of the intention that we may have of desiring the masjid and desiring itikaf. and not having all of those things. But if we try and implement it in another way and we just shift the yardstick a little bit, we could probably get the exact same reward, even though we don't have the ability to do it. There's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned, and he said, a person who always ta'awwada ala khairin, always wanted to do good and always doing good, but they were prevented, they still get the same reward. So whoever can pray, فَصَلِّ قَائِمًا فَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَقَاعِدًا فَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَعَلَى جَنْبٍ. If you can't pray standing, you pray sitting. If you can't pray sitting, you pray lying down. And this principle is something which is universal in the Islamic context. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't give you an opportunity to do something here, try and make that environment somewhere else where you can do it. And then inshallah, with that intention, you get the same reward. Wallahu alam.
Barakallah feekum. Jazakallah Sheikh Mustafa for that. Sheikh Ashraf, Sheikh Syed, Maqsud, Elahi, anything to add? Got a lot of questions coming in. So briefly, anything you want to add to that, Sheikh Mustafa's response?
One thing, this passport is for the male is only the masjid. In Ahnaf, the opinion there, if the women, what they usually pray, that the place of prayer in the home, they can declare is that place as the place of Itikaf. And in that place, she shouldn't come out from, for instance, the room she prays every time. She can declare that room as the place of Itikaf, and she shouldn't come out there as not to meet any the non-mahram or apart from the necessity of the wudu and toilet, she shouldn't step out, restrict her movement in that room. This is the way that the sisters can do at home, but brothers, no way, on the masjid. Wallahu a'lam. Ashraf, anything else?
Ashraf, anything to add on that briefly?
What I would add is that we have to remember that i'tikaf is sunnah mu'akkada. It's not something which is wajib, it's not something which is fard. And so if a sister does go into i'tikaf, then she should not neglect the wajibat. Likewise, if a man follows the opinion that he can do it somewhere in the home, he should not neglect the wajibat. And it would be unfair for a man or a woman to say, this is the last 10 days of Ramadan, I'm going into i'tikaf, and to leave their spouse with all of the household duties alone under these stressful circumstances. So and follow it to carry out the wajibat is more rewarding than to do something which is sunnah mu'akkada. So if a person has a parent that they're looking after, or children that they're looking after, or a spouse that they're looking after, or anything of the sort, or for example, those that are on the front line in the hospitals, or NHS workers, key workers, social workers, even delivery drivers and workers, anything which is deemed to be key to what is going on today, what you are doing is more rewarding than doing i'tikaf in the first place, because you are doing something which is aiding other people in their lives, and it's something which is fard kifaya. It's something compulsory upon the collective. So it's very important in these areas and these issues to bear in mind that it's something which is sunnah mu'akkada. So if you going into i'tikaf is going to lead to disruption or disunity or confrontation, then it's better to leave it off, as you can enter into haram and you can neglect a wajib for the sake of a sunnah, and that's not from fiqh. That's actually, it goes against the fiqh of Islam.
Barakallah feekum. Question here against Zakatul Fitr. Yes, we will be collecting Zakatul Fitr, and we will be distributing Zakatul Fitr to some of the single parent families within our community, especially some of the Rewet sisters. You can pay it online, inshallah. Question here, we've addressed it. Brother or sister probably came late. Can we pray Taraweeh at home? Yes, you can pray Taraweeh at home. We addressed that in one of our earlier answers. Question here, inshallah, from a brother or a sister. We might have addressed it, but maybe not clearly. It's about the inhaler. If somebody is asthmatic, by using the inhaler during the fasting time, does that break the fast? Anybody want to address that one? Sheikh Mustafa, did you touch on that? You didn't really mention the inhaler last time. You mentioned the nasal spray and so on, but
yeah, I mean, I mentioned, I think, briefly about the nasal spray. Yeah. But usually, the thing is, I'm not really too familiar with the asthma pump, so I don't really know exactly where I mean its function and the way it is. So I think maybe it'd probably be better if I defer the question over to maybe Ustad Ashraf, inshallah.
Ashraf, Sheikh Syed, Maqsud,
Allahu A'lam.
anything to add on that? Inhaler, asthma pump, does it break the fast?
As Sheikh Syed Maqsud mentioned, according to the Hanafi madhab, they differentiate between that which provides nutrition to the body and that which does not provide nutrition to the body. So as an example, if someone swallowed a stone, it wouldn't be considered something which breaks the fast. Why? Because it's not something which is desirable and it's not something which provides nutrition to the body. Whereas if someone were to swallow something which is something desirable, i.e. it's something which is desired for consumption and it provides nutrition, then it would break the fast. So the asthma pump, it should be returned back to this issue. Does it provide nutrition to the body? Is it providing some sort of nutrition, or is it providing some sort of stimulant which will be considered a nutrition? I don't know the details, so I can't give a specific answer, but you can very easily find out. So find out what does the asthma pump provide? Is it nutritious? Is it stimulating? And if so, then it would be considered something which should be avoided. So perhaps Sheikh Syed has further clarification.
No, that's fine. You cover everything. Inshallah.
Jazakumullah khair. Question, inshallah, when is the best day to give zakatul fitr? Anybody want to answer that one? When is the best day to give zakatul fitr?
According to the madhahib, generally speaking, it's best to wait. To follow the safest opinion, it's best to wait until as close as possible to Eid al-Fitr. Some of the fuqaha, they do allow it before Ramadan starts. So some of the fuqaha, for example, in the Hanafi madhab, and others, they allow it from the beginning of Ramadan. But there are those that say no, it has to be done as close to Eid as possible, a few days before Eid. So it's best to follow that opinion unless there is a need to do it prior to Ramadan or at the beginning of Ramadan. Let's say, for example, we know of a family within our area and they have no food or drink. You know, they need the money and there's only a few days left until Ramadan. And the only money you can provide for them is from the fitr money, or the only staple food you can provide for them is from fitr, then perhaps give it to them. But if there's any way to work around that, then it's always best to wait until at the very least Ramadan has started, so that you can avoid the area of khilaf. And what I would suggest is that you follow the madhab of your people. So if a person is from the Somali community, follow the Shafi'i madhab. Why? Because if you give your zakat al-fitr too early, and one of your family members finds out, then perhaps it might start some unnecessary dispute. Oh, you gave it too early. Or if you go to your local imam and he finds out, they'll say you gave it too early, and so on. So it's always best to follow the madhab of your people, generally speaking. When I say your people, that which is traditionally followed. As for those that come from a place where there isn't a particular madhab, there's diversity of madhahib, then it's always best to follow the safest opinion, just to be certain.
Barakallah feekum. It's a long answer. The question is it compulsory to follow one school of thought or just follow the Quran and Sunnah? Does that need another time and occasion to answer that one? It's not connected to Ramadan per se, or can someone maybe give a brief response to that?
I think Ashraf briefly touched on this, and in addition to Mustafa's answer, which I think a couple of minutes before, I think that covered most of the bit of this question, and it really needs a quite long session to address this.
But Imam Shakeel, to be brief, it could be just said that the Quran and the Sunnah is following a madhab. The Quran started here, and the Sunnah, the Prophet ﷺ was here. Then you have the Sahaba who took from the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ prohibited them from taking his opinion, his statements, I should say, so that they could focus on the Quran. And then he allowed them to start to compile his statements, and it was compiled and collected alongside the Quran. And then you have the companions now, they were the inheritors of the Prophet ﷺ's understanding, and they spread. Some went to Iraq, some went to North Africa, some went to Central Arabia, etc. And then you had those that came after them, the tabi'een, and they were, that was, you know, Imam Malik, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, having studied with many of the great tabi'een, Imam Abu Hanifa being considered a tabi'i himself and having taken from some of the imams of the tabi'een, they compiled the opinions collected by the tabi'een that came from the companions, and the companions of course took it from the Prophet ﷺ. And so those madahib is a they are a summary of the understanding of the companions, understanding of the Quran and the Sunnah. So by following a madhab, you're following the Quran and the Sunnah. There's no such thing as following a madhab or following the Quran and the Sunnah. If we say following the Quran and the Sunnah or following a madhab, it's like saying, shall I follow a madhab which is not following Quran and Sunnah, or shall I follow Quran and Sunnah? They are one. You cannot separate them. You cannot separate the madhahib from the Quran and the Sunnah, as the Quran and Sunnah is the main source of all of them.
It's a good point. So I think the question, brother or sister, the way the question was put, and it's good Imam Ashraf addressed it, it's like Quran and Sunnah is exclusive from following the madhahib. That if either you follow Quran and Sunnah, which is revelation, or you don't follow revelation, you follow something else, which is the madhahib. And as Imam Ashraf has said, that's not the case. Yeah, it's interlinked. Yeah, so very important. But inshallah, I think that needs a, how do you say, in-depth kind of like maybe lecture discussion at a later stage, inshallah. Inshallah, we're coming nearly to the end, inshallah. And I've got 3 questions here from our viewers. And I think each one of you can maybe address it from your way. One is, how can sisters make the most of Ramadan? Sheikh Ashraf, I think if you can take that one. Sheikh Sabir, how can youngsters make the most of Ramadan? And Sheikh Mustafa, what can parents do for their kids in the month of Ramadan? Yeah, so please, inshallah, with Sheikh Ashraf as a start, inshallah.
So how can sisters make the most of Ramadan? Number one, the recommended acts in Islam are recommended for the men and women. So we can take those recommended acts and act upon them as men and women. There's no differentiation, and that's number one. So for example, the Quran, the recitation, the adhkar, you know, the sadaqah. But there are 2 areas that I would like to focus on, bearing in mind that all of the recommended acts are recommended for both men and women. But there are 2 areas that I would focus on. Number one, intention. What is your intention in your actions? And I'm speaking about the more traditional circumstance where the woman is usually, you know, cooking for the husband, for the children. You know, maybe the husband might cook sometimes, maybe some of the children might cook sometimes, but usually the main source of food in Ramadan is from the woman. So and we should not overlook this fact. This is a real chance for reward. You are feeding fasting people. You know, if a person were just to take a minute to think, what am I cooking for? Why am I cooking? You're cooking for people that are fasting, people that are trying to get closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is a major source of reward. So you could potentially be rewarded for all of the minutes and hours you spend throughout Ramadan preparing meals, whether you spend half an hour a day or 2 hours a day. Households differ, but that's a source of reward. Number 2, the second area. So the first area, not just cooking, but any type of service or care that you're providing for any of your family members. Take a few seconds before you do it to reflect on your intention, whether it's your parents, your children, whether it's your husband, your neighbors, whoever it is. Take a few seconds, a few minutes to reflect why, and you will get reward for that, inshallah. The second area is purification of the heart. And there are 2 areas that I would focus on. Number 1, developing good thoughts of others. And number 2, tackling negative assumptions of others. So developing good thoughts, developing the ability to think highly of others, to be grateful for others. That's a very important area of Islam, and it's one that there is a lot of reward for. And number 2, getting rid of any ill thoughts of others. Focus on the heart. And these 2 areas are usually the downfall for many. So focus on those 2 areas throughout Ramadan as a starting point for rectification of the heart. As the Ramadan is here for rectification and refinement of the heart and the soul. And so focus on that as much as possible, inshallah.
Barakallah feekum. Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Syed Maqsud Elahi.
Shakeel, regarding the youngsters Ramadan, what I would say, you have to understand differently the youngsters' mindset. We know that from the past predecessors, Imam Mujahid, Imam Qatada, they used to spend every night, in Qiyam, they used to finish one whole khatma of the Quran, whole khatma. Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi, 60 times the khatma in the Ramadan. You can't expect from today's youngsters that level of, the ibadah. So I would maybe suggest them the first variety in your ibadah. Either when you have the different mode of the ibadah, it would give you be involved in more of the ibadah in Ramadan. Get into. Otherwise, what's going to happen if you just keep reading Quran? You start maybe in the morning, by evening, next day you will completely become bored and you wouldn't spend time with the Quran anymore. So what I would say, maybe just again put a sheet down. Okay, I'm going to spend 1 hour in reading, and then list down the adhkar. There are so many adhkar of Prophet in our daily life. And it's very important. I always stress in that thing, that especially the adhkar, the sabah adhkar, the morning the adhkar, and the evening adhkar. If you look at this reward, we would think, Allahu Akbar, why should we look here and there? Some of them are saying, Allah will protect you for whole day. Allah will take the guarantee for a guarantee, will be the guarantee for your every aspect of your life. There are so many powerful ad'iyah, adhkar. Let's memorize this thing and put every day, maybe, okay, half an hour, I'll try to memorize this one dua. If I can't memorize, just look at the Hisn al-Muslim or any other book, look it up in the book and learn from there. The first is read the Quran if I know how to read the Quran. And second, the adhkar, try to learn the adhkar. And third, try to understand the Quran. Put any small surah. Let's say Surah An-Nas. What's the sabab al-nuzul? When is it revealed? What it talked about? I would advise every time we should start off with the surah, the one we read mostly in the salah. For instance, if I don't read Surah Maryam in every time in the salah, it's not for me to starting point and let me see what Surah Maryam talks about to understand. It's nothing wrong you go to, but I would prioritize the surah you read mostly in the salah. That's Surah Al-Ma'un. And surah, I was saying the other day, Surah Al-Kawthar. Most of us read I think mostly we use this surah for our salah. It's not that we love this surah so much, it's that the surah is shortest, so we can finish the surah, we can go into our daily business. So I would say, let's read this the surah, the tafsir, the explanation, not just translation, If you just read the translation of the Quran, you won't understand anything, I would say. So make sure, read the explanation, tafsir of the ayah. Even one ayah, you understand a lot. Okay, so first is reading, second is adhkar, learning the dua, and third is reading the tafsir. It's very, very important. And the fourth is, you see, this holiday, it's like a bonus holiday, I would say. Youngsters that tend to be distracted, there's so many things. First thing is football, obviously, then car, then games. And if you notice, this period, alhamdulillah, the most of the things are on complete hold. It's that there is no the league or the premiership or any leagues. So you're very likely to be watching any of the games or the live games. Likewise, you're not going to get to the game shop and get the games again. So try it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitated you by blocking this avenues where the shaitan could come into your life and distract you. Make use of this time. And again, I'm not saying you're going to spend whole day in ibadah, just portion of your time, but increase the daily time and allocate most of the time in your ibadah. And then listen the lecture. When you feel bored by reading, just listen to the lecture, the scholars, inshallah. This is how they can make most of Allah.
Jazakallah khair. Sheikh Mustafa, any points in terms of parents?
When it comes to parents, I probably I'll probably say it boils down to two main issues, or two main points of advice, I would say. Providing the environment in the home in which the children would be able to come or seek nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, first and foremost. And also the second main point, which is probably the most important, I would add, is being a good example. Because usually children often emulate their parents. If they see their parents doing something which is contradictory to what they're saying, often what happens is that they themselves do not take the advice seriously at all. So parents, I would probably say the most important thing is to be a good example to the children by showing the children how to do ibadah, praying, reading Quran, and doing all of these actions, speaking good words, focusing on the soul and purification of the spirit, and all of these things, I think would have a huge impact. And subhanAllah, we always forget that sometimes the things we find the most easiest, we relegate it and do not think it's of any benefit whatsoever. So for example, simply making dua for the children. I think that's something which is really important and this should be inside Ramadan and outside of Ramadan, to always make sure that the parents always supplicate for their children, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep them guided, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always helps them and enables them to be the best people that they could ever be, I think is really important. So providing the environment at home in which people would be able to do all of the actions that they need to do in order to gain Allah's forgiveness this month. So making an area where there's prayers, making it prayer friendly, making it Quran friendly, and also being a good example themselves and not expecting the children to do something that they're not doing themselves. I think it really boils down to these issues. And if they do that, inshallah, I will have a good intention, inshallah, and make a lot of supplications, inshallah, hopefully that would have a huge impact. Allah knows best.
There is a question about Eid, and what I would say in terms of the question says, well, the masjid won't be open for Eid, so what can a person do on Eid? We do not know the circumstances concerning Eid at the moment, so it's difficult to kind of like say exactly what the plans will be. But please keep tuned in, inshallah, to our website and some of our reminders and classes, and inshallah we will let you know if there's any changes concerning Eid Salah, where it will be, if it will happen in the masjid or outside, or if it won't happen. And if it doesn't happen in the masjid or outside, what can you do? So inshallah, we will update you with that, inshallah. I want to conclude, inshallah. I've received messages from East London Masjid, some of the other masajid, and also Saudi, kind of like the moon sighting committee have announced they've sighted the moon first night of Ramadan, and this is alhamdulillah for our viewers who are viewing this live stream, for them to know that the moon has been sighted and the sighting has been confirmed. And the masajid, the big masajid in London, including East London Masjid and other masajid, have announced tonight will be the first night of Ramadan and tomorrow will be the first day of Ramadan. So alhamdulillah, Allah Ta'ala's blessing that Allah Ta'ala has given us, that tawfiq and that blessing of inshallah benefiting from Ramadan. Some of our brothers and sisters have passed away recently due to the virus. Some of our brothers and sisters after last Ramadan in between passed away. We remember them. We ask Allah Ta'ala to forgive them, their shortcomings, their mistakes, and grant them mercy and grant them Jannah al-Firdaus. And we ask Allah Ta'ala for those of us who are alive, for us to get the full kind of like benefit and the full blessing and the full mercy of this blessed month. And as Sheikh Mustafa mentioned concerning the virus, nobody really knows how long they've got on this earth. We can't plan for next Ramadan and the following Ramadan or even Eid. Allah Ta'ala knows best. It could be final Ramadan. It could be we get a few days of this Ramadan. So very, very important, our listeners and viewers, and it's crucial. It's crucial to try and make the most of Ramadan. Very important. And I think all of our guests have mentioned the numerous things you can do. There's qiyam, there's salah, there's Quran, there's sadaqah, there's dhikr, there's dua. People ask questions, what can I do in Ramadan? That should not be a question for a Muslim. That should not be a question for a Muslim, because there's so many good deeds that you can do. And you'll be attaining blessing upon blessing and blessing upon blessing and rewards from Allah Ta'ala because of the blessedness of this month that Allah Ta'ala has blessed us with. So with that, brothers and sisters, we want to conclude. I want to thank the listeners, inshallah. May Allah Ta'ala reward you all, inshallah. I want to thank our special guest, inshallah, Sheikh Ashraf Dabous, Sheikh Syed Maqsud Elahi, Sheikh Mustafa Omer, for giving us their valuable time. And may Allah Ta'ala reward them with khair, increase them in khair. And Allah Ta'ala, inshallah, raise their status in this dunya and in the hereafter. I also want to thank our center coordinator, Jen Kani, who facilitated and organized this for this live stream to take place. With that, inshallah, we conclude. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.